Hello, everyone, and welcome to this mini episode of Catechism Fridays. We are going to talk about social justice, and if that is not a phrase that we hear all the time lately, if you're watching on YouTube, hello, and if you're just on the podcast listening in, it's good to have you with us. And of course, it's the royal we. We're going to start. I'm Christine Flynn, by the way. I don't think I said that. We're going to start in paragraph 1928. We talked about last week, authority, or 2 weeks ago, maybe, last episode, we'll say, on authority and the common good. And now we're talking about social justice, respect for the human person, and equality and differences among them. So let's get started. 1928. Society ensures social justice when it provides conditions that allow associations or individuals to obtain what is their due, according to their nature and their vocation. Social justice is linked to the common good and the exercise of authority. Social justice can be obtained only in respecting the transcendent dignity of man. The person represents the ultimate end of society, which is ordered to him. What is at stake is the dignity of the human person, whose defense and promotion have been entrusted to us by the Creator, and to whom the men and women at every moment of history are strictly and responsibly in debt. I think it's really interesting that the end goal of society is the human person, and not the other way around, right? The end goal of the human person isn't a society. I think we can see right from the start why the Catholic Church is not socialist or communist. Okay, paragraph 19. Respect for the human person entails respect for the rights that flow from his dignity as a creature. These rights are prior to society and must be recognized by it. They are the basis of the moral legitimacy of every authority. By flouting them or refusing to recognize them in its positive legislation, a society undermines its own moral legitimacy. If it does not respect them, authority can rely only on force or violence to obtain obedience from its subjects. It is the Church's role to remind men of goodwill of these rights and to distinguish them from unwarranted or false claims. Respect for the human person proceeds by way of respect for the principle that everyone should look upon his neighbor without any exception as another self, above all bearing in mind his life and the means necessary for living it with dignity. No legislation could by itself do away with the fears, prejudices, and attitudes of pride and selfishness which obstruct the establishment of truly fraternal societies. Such behavior will cease only through the charity that finds in every man a neighbor, a brother. The duty of making oneself a neighbor to others and actively surveying them becomes even more urgent when it involves the disadvantaged, in whatever area this may be. As you did it for, I'm sorry, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it for me. Of course, it's from Matthew. And Jesus, I'm sure, said it a lot better without stuttering. The same duty extends to those who think or act differently from us. The teaching of Christ goes so far as to require forgiveness of offenses. He extends the commandment of love, which is that of the new law, to all enemies. Liberation in the spirit of the gospel is incompatible with hatred of one's enemy as a person, but not with hatred of the evil that he does as an enemy. Of course, remember, love the sinner, hate the sin. Right there, perfectly applicable. I'll tell you what, reading this part one, respect for the human person, which is paragraphs 1929 to 1933, it just smacks, how in the world can you, the disadvantaged, the vulnerable, that's a baby, isn't it? But hey, legislation says it's okay in a lot of places, but that is changing, thanks be to God. Okay. Equality and differences among men, paragraph 1934. Created in the image of the one God and equally endowed with rational souls, all men have the same nature and the same origin. Redeemed by the sacrifice of Christ, all are called to participate in the same divine beatitude. All, therefore, enjoy equal dignity. The equality of men rests essentially on their dignity as persons and the rights that flow from it. Every form of social or cultural discrimination and fundamental personal rights on the grounds of sex, race, color, social conditions, language, or religion must be curbed and eradicated as incompatible with God's design. On coming into the world, man is not equipped with everything he needs for developing his bodily and spiritual life. He needs others Differences appear tied to age, physical abilities, intellectual or moral aptitudes, the benefits derived from social commerce, and the distribution of wealth. These talents are not distributed equally. These differences belong to God's plan, who wills that each receive what he needs from others, and that those endowed with particular talents share the benefits with those who need them. These differences encourage and often oblige persons to practice generosity, kindness, and sharing of goods. They foster the mutual enrichment of cultures. From St. Catherine of Siena, she writes, I distribute the virtues quite diversely. I do not give all of them to each person, but some to one, some to others. I shall give principally charity to one, justice to another, humility to this one, a living faith to that one. And so that I have given my many gifts and graces, both spiritual and temporal, with such diversity that I have not given everything to one single person, so that you may be constrained to practice charity towards one another. I have willed that one should not need another, that one should need another, and that all should be my ministers in distributing the graces and gifts they have received from me. So God has purposefully distributed our talents differently so that we can lean on one another. No man is an island, as the saying goes. And then in paragraph 1938, there exists also sinful inequalities that affect millions of men and women. These are the open contradictions of the gospel. Equal dignity as persons demands that we strive for fairer and more humane conditions. Excessive economic and social disparity between individuals and people of one human race is a source of scandal and militates against social justice, equity, human dignity, as well as social and international peace. And then finally, so I click through here, human solidarity. This is paragraph 1939. The principle of solidarity, also articulated in terms of friendship or social charity, is a direct demand of human and Christian brotherhood. In error, today abundantly widespread is disregard for the law of human solidarity and charity, dictated and imposed both by our common origin and by the equality and rational nature of all men, whatever nation they belong to. This law is sealed by the sacrifice of redemption offered by Jesus Christ on the altar of the cross to his heavenly Father on behalf of sinful humanity. Solidarity is manifested in the first place by the distribution of goods and remuneration for work. It also presupposes the effort for a more just social order, where tensions are better able to be reduced and conflicts more readily settled by negotiation. Socioeconomic problems can be resolved only with the help of all the forms of solidarity. Solidarity of the poor among themselves, between rich and poor, of workers among themselves, between employers and employees in a business, solidarity among nations and peoples. International solidarity is a requirement of the moral order. World peace depends in part upon this. And finally, in paragraph 1942, the virtue of solidarity goes beyond material goods. In spreading the spiritual goods of the faith, the church has promoted and often opened new paths for the development of temporal goods as well. And so, throughout the centuries, has the Lord's saying been verified. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be yours as well. For 2,000 years, this sentiment has lived and endured in the soul of the church. This is from Pope Pius XII, impelling souls then and now to the heroic charity of monastic farmers, liberators of slaves, healers of the sick, and messengers of faith, civilization, and science to all generations and all peoples for the sake of creating the social conditions capable of offering to everyone possible a life worthy of man and of a Christian. It's funny, the more I hear about social justice or social justice warriors, right, and this desire to bring upon our country and the Western world a more socialistic, or if that's even a word, socialized communist state, it's almost as if they're trying to take apart the dignity that God has given us and recreate it without God in mind. And it's a mess, right? It's like the Tower of Babel, like trying to fit all these things together, and it's with the wrong end goal. It's a really hot mess. The truth of how of the dignity of the human person and what we ought to do as members of the human society is so clearly laid out in the Catholic faith, and just reading these words from the Catholic Catechism, that if we try to take the Catholic faith out of this, we do wind up with a very confused idea of how best to orient our lives and how to help others. And it certainly doesn't help. We can't help others if we're making others do it through coercion and violence. So stick to the Catholic faith, and she will guide you beautifully to a holy life and to help others also in getting to heaven, and to practice that charity that God has given us as well. All right, so everyone, I will be back next time, and we will talk about. Let's see what we're going to talk about. I got my phone. My phone just dropped off here. We are going to talk about. Hang on. God's salvation, law and grace, including the moral law and natural moral law. That should be interesting. That's my husband Pat Flynn's bailiwick right there. He's very good at natural law. He's a natural law guy. So well, I'm sure there's plenty of episodes for next time. I will link to some of the podcast episodes that Pat and I have done together on the natural law so that you can dive in more deeply if you would like. All right, everyone, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you are there, if you are listening on audio, please subscribe wherever you listen. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can go to my website, thecatholicmama.com. You'll also find there a free ebook, How to Talk to Your Kids About God, which includes some really good Q&As that my children had asked me, and I've heard from other parents that their children have asked, and how to best to tackle some of those tough questions. All right, everyone, until next time.